Hello and welcome to TEDCast, the show that answers the questions on team leaders' minds. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at how AI, or artificial intelligence, can enhance your work with TED. Following on from a session we ran at Lancashire Teaching Hospitals, we talked with team leaders around how AI can fit into their TED cycle. We hope you enjoy. So the subject of artificial intelligence is one which is highly publicised at the moment, and more it's becoming part of our everyday lives. There are definitely ways that AI can help us, but there are also challenges and risks to be aware of when we use AI. So in today's session, we're going to explore how artificial intelligence can enhance your work with TED and how to be mindful of the pitfalls and risks associated with using it to guide your teamwork. The key learning points which we're looking to cover are how you can use AI to help your TED work, and also how to ask the right questions of your artificial intelligence platform so that you can make the most out of your work with TED and AI. The key objectives are thinking around how you as a team leader can use artificial intelligence in your team engagement work. If you understand the risks and limitations associated with AI, you can maximize its potential so that you can get the most out of it. I'll share an example of how you can use AI to examine or analyze a TED report, and share how our team leaders thought around how they could enhance their own team discussions using artificial intelligence to guide their action planning with their teams. Firstly, our group discussed the benefits of AI, and thinking around ways we were using it in our everyday life, people identified how they might use it to ask questions, to simplify web searches, or to interpret complex data sets and summarize the key focus points. When we thought about how it could be used with TED, we talked around how it could improve the efficiency of your work with the team. We know in the NHS in particular that teams are really stretched for time. So anything that could speed up the TED process without detracting from some of the key benefits you get from a TED conversation was seen as a real positive for team leaders using it. We also acknowledge how AI can help by providing impartial advice. When your team accesses TED and is looking through a TED report, sometimes it can be quite emotive for team members and for team leaders. And it can be difficult to separate these emotions, which are important to acknowledge in the team, but it can also be really useful to get an objective outside perspective. And AI provides a really useful way that you can do this. We also discussed in our group how AI can support continuous improvement. It can help you keep that momentum with TED. And as always with TED, it's never intended to be a one-off intervention. The idea is that you'll continuously improve. The more times you revisit the TED process, the more times you check in on the engagement perspective with your team and understand the context with which your team is working through at the moment and how things might have shifted since you last had an engagement discussion. So AI was seen as a good way of keeping that momentum when you're working with TED and your team. So let's have a look now. I'm going to share my screen and show you how we can use Microsoft Copilot to examine a TED report and help you ask the right questions for your team conversations. Okay, so on my screen now, you can see my web browser on the right-hand side of my screen. I've also got a folder open on the left where I've downloaded a TED report as an example from what a typical team would look through. When I open the TED report, we can see things which might typically crop up for a team using TED. If I'm looking at this survey and planning for my team discussion, there'll be certain things I want to pick up on. These might be, what are the key positives for my team? What are the areas where my team's a little bit weaker, and how can we work on those factors? But also, how can we build on our strengths and give recognition to those that have contributed to it? So looking through this example report, I can see that factors like team purpose score particularly strongly. We can see out of the 4 questions, there's only 1 in here which isn't highlighted in green. As we scroll down, there are other areas such as working together which perform particularly strong, but some lower questions around decision making and team members feeling involved or committed to team decision making. As we scroll down, there are other greens in our survey, and there are some areas like review and celebrate success, which have no greens in there. Our lowest scoring area is in the question around resources, as we've discussed in a previous TEDcast, but also some lower areas in terms of recommending the organisation and team engagement. When we look at some of the questions in the free text section, themes such as feeling supported by the team and feeling a sense of togetherness and supportiveness across the team really shine through as key strengths for this team. In terms of things people would like to improve, it's feedback around resources, in particular staffing numbers, and something which teams often see in the NHS, but often it's outside of your control whether you can actually influence that. So having looked at the TED report, I can get a really quick understanding of what are the key areas I might like to work on and how can I enhance this with my team or work with the team to overcome challenges that we might see. When we think about AI, there are different platforms which we could use. Platforms like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Apple Intelligence, are all different AI platforms amongst the multitude that are out there on the internet. The one we explored in our workshop with Lancashire Teaching Hospitals was Microsoft 365 Copilot. This was seen as a package which lent itself to the way people worked. At Lancashire Teaching Hospitals, we have an Office 365 subscription, which includes Copilot as part of that package. When we looked at this, Copilot provides some prompts for things that you could ask the artificial intelligence around things that you might want to explore. But in terms of engaging with it, it can be as simple as typing in a question and seeing what the AI can pull out. As a very sort of general overview, AI pulls information from the internet, it collates it together and gives you a response which summarizes all the information that it's found. So it can save you a lot of time, which you might have spent web searching, looking at different websites and coming up with your own solutions. This offers the benefits of saving time, being more efficient, and giving you some quick, concise points to be able to work on. The downsides to this might be that it's less clear where that information is coming from and how reliable that information might be. So we talked in our group around how you can use this mindfully and take on board the suggestions AI is giving you without following all the suggestions to the letter and using your own autonomy and the thoughts and feelings of the team to guide how you might want to use it. So here's an example of how we can do this with TED. On the left-hand side of my screen, I've got that example TED report, which we've just had a look at. I can pull this into my chat box in Microsoft Copilot, and I can ask the AI, what are the key points highlighted on my team's engagement report? Simple as that. I'm asking a simple question, and essentially I want it to summarize those results. Let's see what it gives us. When I click send, the AI quickly reads through that PDF document. It pulls out what it sees as the key positives and areas that this team might want to improve. You can see it writes different things. It also asks me if I want a visual summary of those results. I've already got that through TED, so maybe I just want to look back at what it sees are the key headlines. So when we look in here, it summarizes the overall scores, which we can see from our TED report, and it gives us some top strengths. So it quickly pulls out what are the highest scoring areas in my TED report, and it gives me areas for improvement. So it pulls out where are those lowest scoring areas. So it's a very simple overview that's collating all those numbers in your TED report and quickly showing you what are the top performers, what are the lowest performers. Now, what I might want to do here is look through some of the qualitative feedback. So the AI is telling me that strong mutual support is clear from the comments, being friendly and respectful, patient-centered is in there, team members feel listened to and appreciated, but suggestions for improvement around staffing, staff retention, encourage team building activities. So these might be things that I want to work on further. Now, when we discussed this in our group, it was clear that some of these suggestions aren't necessarily things we can do anything about. And if we stopped here, this might not really help us in terms of our work with our team. As a team leader, you might be thinking, well, okay, I can see what it's shown here from the TED report, but how do I actually take this forward? And what sorts of questions can I ask my team to get into a constructive conversation around how we overcome some of these challenges and how we maximize the benefits that have been highlighted through TED? So what we can do is ask the AI another question, get it to go a bit deeper into some of those areas that we might want to work on. So let's ask the AI, how can I work with my team to overcome some of challenges? Let's see what we get. You can see again, the AI is pulling information. It's searching the internet for recommended team working activities that you can do on this particular topic that are coming out from this TED report. And here it's addressing that lower scoring question around resource constraints. So action steps it's suggesting: conducting a resource audit, identify gaps in staffing, equipment at a time, prioritize needs, work with leadership to advocate for critical resources. So thinking around how you might want to influence. It's also suggesting how you might streamline workflows, tools, processes, and improvements and inefficiencies. In terms of decision making, we might be looking at ideas to hold regular team huddles, use collaborative tools, or rotate meeting facilitators to empower different team members to lead discussions. So some really quick and simple ideas that you might want to consider to embed into your team activities. Now, looking at these, some of these might be realistic for you, and some of these might just not be possible based on the way your team works or the situation that, or the sort of context that you're working through at this moment. So it's important to take on board these suggestions, but understand that you don't have to do everything that the AI suggests. In terms of the accountability you get from AI, the only accountability is what you set with your team. And what I would suggest with this is perhaps use these points to build into your team conversation. Get the team to have a look through these suggestions and think around actually what's practical for us, what could we try, and what maybe do we want to cross off this list because it's not realistic for us or it's not appropriate for the way our team works. Something I might ask it, so in terms of resource constraints, it's looking for ways we can streamline workflows. So what I might want to ask it as a follow-up question is, how can I work with my team to streamline our workflows? Let's see what it suggests. So it's suggesting ways that we can map out current workflows. It's also suggesting web tools like Lucidchart or Miro. Now, you might not have access to these, so I might want to ask this a follow-up question. If you don't have access to a notes tool, how can I do this in a team workshop? Part of a meeting. Let's try that. There we go. Great question. Without access to a digital notes tool, you can still run an effective workshop. So here it's giving me an outline for that workshop. It's saying it's 45 to 60 minutes. So it might be a typical team meeting that you want to build this in. And it's giving you advice as a team leader, how you want to set the scene, giving you a step-by-step guide to workflow mapping. It's getting you to identify pain points and ideas. It also gives you prompt questions so that you can open that conversation to your team, get the team suggestions. And one thing one of our team leaders suggested while we were looking at this in our workshop is that you might do this live during your TED team session and ask those sorts of things, get the AI to ask. And what that does is it takes some of the personalization out of it and helps you to look objectively at the problems without sort of building in that emotion into it, which might distract you from what the root cause of the problems might be. So we've got some suggestions in there, but there might be an even better resource. And this is where you might want to come back to your TED dashboard. So let's say we're working on resources here, or we're looking at workflow mapping. If I come on to the TED website here, we might want to look specifically in the TED toolkit for a resource around this topic. So let's look in here at resource. Okay, so as I start to type resource in here, okay, we can see we've got some leadership resources, things around giving feedback. We've got some things around psychological safety, but none of them are specific to that sort of decision making or process mapping that we might have. So we'll try something different. We start to type decision making. Oh, maybe our decision making matrix grid might be a useful tool here. Now, what I can do with TED resources is I can download this as something that I can hand out to team members or use myself as a guide during our team session. As I download this, it gives us the decision-making grid. And this might help us think around that decision process, around the resource that we use. What I can do with this, if I download it, it will save it into my downloads folder here. And we can see that's happening as we speak. And once it has downloaded, I can use this document in our artificial intelligence tool. So I've downloaded a decision-making matrix grid here, and I can pull this into the AI, so it's in the same conversation. The advantage of this is that the AI remembers the questions I've already asked, it remembers the suggestions it's given, and now it will build in this TED tool activity, and I can ask it how I can use this tool to enhance the work with my team. So let's try this. How can I use this tool to help my team work? And let's see what it gives us. Here we go. So we've got, it's saying the decision-making grid is a practical tool that can help our team make thoughtful, structured decisions, especially when we're comparing multiple options. When we look at the purpose of the tool, it gives us an overview of how it can be used in a team setting. It summarizes some of the key points from that document and gives you those steps for how you can take this forward. So you can see there how in this simple example, I've gone from looking at a team report, getting the key headlines from my TED report, and then using it alongside TED toolkits to plan out my team working session. Now, one of the questions I often get asked when team leaders are looking to use TED is how can we make this work in the short amount of time that our team has together? So what I might want to ask here is, how can I use this with my team when we only get 30 minutes together each day? There we go. Let's see what it comes out with this. So if time is a challenge for you and your team, why not ask the AI for innovative ways that you can keep that momentum going and keep building on that continuous improvement that you're doing with the team? So let's say what it's got here. So it's suggesting that we can do it in bite-sized steps across a few days. So it's saying that day one, we could focus on defining the decision and the criteria for success. Day two is about generating options, and day three is about scoring the options before on day four we decide and plan. So in less than a week there, it's showing how a team with really limited time can break down an activity like this into manageable steps that keep that momentum going, keep you focused on the key things you want to get out of TED, and suggest some key ways forward. What you might want to do after going through these steps is pull in your results, your suggestions from your team conversations, and add them to the same AI conversation to suggest next steps. You can even ask AI to draw up an action plan template, or you could use one of the ones in TED. So that's just a quick and simple example of how you can use AI to build on that TED work. And we discussed this in depth as part of our team conversation when we shared it with team leaders from Lancashire Teaching Hospitals. Now, if we come back to our slides, we had a look at some of the risks associated with using AI. So having thought about this demonstration, it seems fairly straightforward, but it's important when we do this to be mindful of the risks and be mindful that the suggestions aren't always necessarily the right way forward. What they can do, however, is help to give you a starter to start those conversations with your team. And as always with TED, the important part of the process is in those team conversations. It's about building relationships with each other to make your team feel more resilient, feel stronger together, and more appreciative of the different perspectives that come across your team. When we talked about the risks, things like data protection and privacy were at the top of people's thoughts, and it is important to be mindful of that. With TED, it is an anonymous report. So unless there's anything specifically in your free text comments which could identify an individual, like someone's name or a specific example that references them, then TED is a safe way that you can share information. However, it is important to be mindful of what you're putting into the AI before you start to ask it questions. So we would always recommend reading through your TED report first, especially the free text comments, to make sure that there's nothing in there that could undermine that confidentiality and that anonymity which people expect when they come to use something like TED. The second risk we thought about when using artificial intelligence is that the AI lacks the intuition. It doesn't know the context for your team unless you input that into your questions as part of building that conversation with the AI. It also doesn't necessarily recognize the thoughts and feelings that might be going on in the team. You might be in a team that's feeling really under pressure, and it's important to be mindful of those feelings when you're delivering any type of feedback so that you can do it in a compassionate and tactful way. So when you get the suggestions from AI, it's important to be mindful that you might want to adapt your delivery of that back to your team. Or I think it's a good suggestion to be open around how you've used AI, and maybe, as I've said, use it as part of your team session. You might want to use the AI live in your team session and really be clear with team members that this is just an idea to start our conversation. Let's use AI to give us some suggestions, and then we can look at whether they'll work for us or whether they won't. You can even use it as a bit of fun and call out the things that might be ridiculous or just unachievable for you as a team. Use that to have a bit of a laugh, but use it constructively to think of, okay, this suggestion doesn't work, but let's consider why it doesn't work, and then maybe ask a follow-up question of the AI so that it understands your context and understands the challenges that you might face, and it can suggest something that is more manageable, more realistic for the way that your teams works. Third point on here is that the AI may misunderstand data or the context for your team. So it's important to always read through your TED report as well as getting the AI to summarize, because there might be occasions where it is misinterpreting the data. There might be reasons that the AI is unaware of as to why something scores lower than others. And there may be occasions when you're looking at a TED report where the lower scoring question in your TED report isn't actually the area you want to work on. And it might be that that lower scoring area is something which you acknowledge as a team, but you're comfortable with, and that there's a more pressing area which you as a team feel is more appropriate. The AI won't necessarily know that. So it's important to put that personal context and that team context into your decision process, and just use the AI as a tool to help influence and support any decision making that you might be using. The next risk which we identified is the danger of becoming over-reliant on AI. Also, that it lacks accountability. So I mentioned earlier that the AI will just produce suggestions based on things that it finds out there on the internet. It doesn't necessarily know your specific team context. So if you become over-reliant on it, there's a danger that you and your team will lack the accountability because you're outsourcing that to AI. Now, the AI isn't accountable for what you do as a team. The actual practical application of any of these suggestions come down to the way you as a team leader and your team implement them in practice. So it's important that whatever suggestions you come to when you create your action plan following TED, even if they're things that AI has recommended, that the team takes accountability for making them work. And if the team doesn't feel ready to take accountability, then maybe you'd use AI to suggest something slightly different, or you'd use the team suggestions for how they can implement something which they can get behind, which they can buy into and do their best to implement. It's not to say everything will work 100% of the time. And the continuous improvement nature of TED means that when you're ready for your next TED report, you can reflect on this, reflect on what's worked and what maybe hasn't worked, and maybe build that into the questions you ask AI in the future, but also, most importantly, the questions that you ask each other in the team and the things you reflect on when planning for that follow-up TED and those next steps in your team's development. In terms of mitigating these risks, some factors really stood out. So when I discussed this with team leaders around that idea of anonymity and data protection, we identified that it's important to only share anonymous data. So that's where it's important to look through your TED report before you upload it into an AI platform. The second thing we discussed was to make sure you don't assume that the answers and suggestions are correct. Remember, asking AI is like asking an expert from outside your organization to come in and make suggestions about your team. They might have a wealth of information, experience, and knowledge, but they don't necessarily know the specifics of your team, your organization, your challenges, your strengths. So you can definitely factor it in, but ultimately it's you and the team who know best what are those steps that you should be taking. Next point was to use AI to inform your conversations, but don't use it as a replacement for them. The most important part of the TED process is having conversations with your team. It's about talking about the things that matter most to you and to the team. And if you use AI just to jump through those conversations to a solution, then it's less likely that the team can get behind those solutions because they haven't explored and had chance to reflect and digest on the context which has been presented through their TED report. So always use AI to inform your conversations, but definitely not as a replacement for them. Next key point is something that I showed you in those examples. Keep asking questions to drill down into the issue. If AI doesn't give you the answer which really works for your team, ask a follow-up question to give the AI a bit more information to understand why the original suggestion wasn't quite appropriate or wouldn't work for you. The more context you can give the artificial intelligence, the more specific the suggestions can be and the more relevant they can be to you and your team. And finally, it's important to really be clear with the team. When you are using AI, again, around this topic of accountability, make sure you make it clear with the team that the team are in control of any successes and how to apply any actions. And although AI might help with those suggestions, ultimately it comes down to you as a team leader and to the team into making those actions a success. So make that clear from the outset so that everybody understands how they will be involved and how they can contribute to the actions that you put in place as a team. So to summarize this session, AI is a really useful tool to help you with your team engagement work, to help you quickly understand your TED work, and to help speed up the process. It can help by offering suggestions, but it's important that you use it in the appropriate way and use it as a tool. Just like with TED itself, it's a tool to help engagement, but ultimately it's the work of the people in your team. It's about the relationships you build together and how you pull together to overcome challenges, but also how you give recognition and celebrate success so that you can build on your successes together and build on those strengths that you have. Remember that it's not a replacement for teamwork. And although AI can be really useful in helping you gain suggestions and think of the way forward, it's not a replacement from the suggestions of your team, from understanding different perspectives, recognizing diverse opinions, and coming to a consensus as to what's right for you and your team in the way forward. And with TED and artificial intelligence, you have the tools there to help you and your team do your best work. We hope you found that session useful and have identified ways that you can use AI to enhance your team engagement work and enhance what you do with TED with your team. Please leave comments if you've got any suggestions for ways we can build on this session or ideas for future TEDcast episodes which would help you and your team.